Good evening, everyone. This is the Conservation Commission meeting. It is Thursday, February 9th, 2023. Members in attendance this evening, there's Jenna Maya as member, George Bacon as member, Jessica Gino, member clerk, Mark Phillips, vice chair, myself, John Schmallenberger as chair, Heather Hampson, conservation agent. Do we have confirmation of agenda?
No changes.
Okay. Then we will move on to the next.
You have to vote on that.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Get it right, John.
Get it right. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as written?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed nay. Passes unanimously. Okay, do we have the approval of meeting minutes for January 26th, 2023? Anyone had any changes, comments?
I tried to find something, but I really couldn't.
I start slipping things in.
Motion to approve the meeting minutes for January 26th, 2023 as written?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed nay. Passes unanimously. Okay, we have the time of the evening is for public input. Do we have anyone here who would like to say anything? Ask a question? No? No? Okay. Very good. Moving right along. Our first item this evening is a discussion with Joe Arenado. Did I say that?
Honorado.
Honorado.
Yep.
Honorado. I apologize.
They all blend, you know, it's, yeah, if you look at it, it's just kind
Is
of,
that Italian?
it is, yeah. Yep.
So Ayer Pond Treatments 2022 season. Would you care to join
You want
us?
me to pull up?
Yes, please.
Sure. All right.
Nice to see you.
Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, I think I was here last year. I almost remember it. I think so, or maybe it was the year before.
Hybrid?
Probably
or-
last year. No. Maybe it was before that. I don't know. The years blend, but everybody looks familiar. So I think all of you have been around for a little while anyway. So you're probably all familiar with the Ayer Ponds management. I know Heather's kind of new, but so you're coming along. But
Oh, yeah.
I notified her all season long too.
Oh,
So yeah. So hopefully you got a chance to look at the year-end report. Hopefully everybody's had a chance. That way we don't have to go through it with a fine-tooth comb. But you know, this year we'll get to Sandy Pond and the algae bloom. But predominantly it's been a weed control program for control of invasive and nuisance species, right? So obviously there's Pine Meadow, Sandy, and Flanagan. Flanagan is really the most challenging, you know, because it's just so shallow, especially that eastern area, just extremely shallow. And it has 3 invasive species, so fanwort, variable milfoil, and curlyleaf pondweed. So in 2021, we went pretty aggressively at Flanagan Pond with sonar. So sonar's always been used in the Ayer Ponds, mainly for fanwort control in kind of a spot management fashion. But when we first got out there, I mean, we kind of looked at everything and we're like, you know, it's everywhere. I think we had reviewed the 2020 year-end report and it's just literally everywhere. And so the challenge with fanwort is there's really only 2 products, 2 registered herbicides that will control fanwort. So milfoil, there's a variety. There's some that'll control it for a long period of time. Fanwort, challenging because there's really only 2. There's Clipper, which for some reason, I'm still not totally sure, but Clipper can't be used in any of the Ayer Ponds. I don't know whether it has to do with some sort of a downstream ACEC or natural heritage or something.
It's turtles, isn't it? Or it's some little critter.
We talked to somebody at Natural Heritage.
Okay.
And they said it's partly because it's ACEC.
Yep, that's probably it.
That they would not be inclined. It would
Yep.
have to go through them, and they would not be inclined.
Yeah.
This was at least a few years
Yeah,
ago.
so Clipper, you know, Clipper's a contact herbicide, kind of like a diquat, but it kills a lot of things, right? It's a pretty aggressive herbicide in that it almost kills everything in its path. right? And so Natural Heritage doesn't love that. I mean, even when we use it in like a spot management fashion. That's one, right, it does kill a lot of things, but it also has a very short half-life. It works very quickly. So if you're spot treating like an acre or two, it'll stay pretty confined to that acre or two, and it's in and out of the water very quickly. So that's kind of how we use Clipper, but it's off the table in the air ponds. So that leaves us only with sonar for fan wart control. So sonar, the challenge is there, is that it needs to build and maintain a concentration. So as opposed to a diquat or a Clipper where it gets uptaken by the plants very quickly, in and out of the system, it's almost like, and I hate using swimming pool analogies because all our clients want to turn their ponds into swimming pools, which we're totally against, but it's kind of almost like using chlorine in a pool, in that if you fill it with raw water from a tanker or from your hose, right, it's just the water itself. And so you need to get the chlorine concentration in a pool so that it's safe and it, you know, kills the bacteria, so on and so forth. So you add more initially, but then you have your half-life, it starts to break down, you know, it gets lost on people and other things, and you have to add more throughout the summer, right, to maintain that concentration. And so that's really how sonar works, is you're building and maintaining that concentration. So it basically needs a contact exposure time of like 8 to 10 parts per billion of sonar, so very, very low concentrations to control fan wart. It needs to maintain that concentration for like 60 days. So in order to do that, you need to build this concentration, bump it or boost it, and boost it again, potentially, right, to maintain that contact exposure time. So the challenge with the air ponds is that it's used in a spot treatment fashion, right? And so you can imagine you almost have to superdose some of those areas to try and maintain a concentration in a small area, given that it's diluting within the pond. So the good thing is that there is a time-released granular formulation of sonar, which is called Sonar 1, so we can essentially load up the pellets on these, you know, fan wart beds or target plant beds and use it that way. But in 2021, we went after Flanagan Pond the way sonar is really supposed to be used. Of course, it was the wettest year on record, so it was probably the worst sonar season ever, but still, we got great control that year. That kind of good segue into 2022. We still saw that carryover control that we want and expect from sonar. Probably not as much as I really would have hoped, admittedly, but it's still, you know, we still noticed a drastic reduction in fan wart and variable milfoil, surprisingly, which is somewhat less susceptible to sonar than fan wart is. Challenge in Flanagan as well, you have curly leaf pondweed, which reproduces through turion, so essentially winter buds. So you're not going to get systemic control of a curly leaf pondweed even when you use a systemic product like a sonar. So we expected that to come, you know, back with full force. So we kind of got a grasp on Flanagan Pond in 2021 to where it's now much more manageable. And so 2022 kind of went back to the, I don't want to say same old, but back to diquat for curly leaf pondweed and variable milfoil, and then using sonar granular in more of a spot treatment fashion. So that goes for both Sandy and Flanagan. Sandy's really nice. I mean, it's a lot deeper. You know, it's just a really, really nice pond. And luckily, those invasives have really been confined to two areas, the area where it meets up with Flanagan and then the other inlet. But just very, very small areas that we're managing in Sandy Pond. We're also managing some invasive Phragmites in Sandy Pond. And then in Pine Meadow, luckily fan wart has stayed out of there, so it's really just curly leaf pondweed and variable milfoil, which are very susceptible to diquat. So Pine Meadow, from an invasive species perspective, pretty easy because we're not dealing with fan wart, we're not trying to spot treat fan wart with sonar, so on and so forth. So then you have your Phragmites, which really, I think there's maybe a small patch or two at Flanagan, don't quote me, we'd have to look at the maps. There's definitely a bunch, kind of scattered patches around Sandy Pond, which we treated in 2021, got great control. We weren't able to treat Phragmites at Sandy Pond this year because, well, we'll get into that, but I didn't build a town for it. So we didn't treat for it, and I didn't build a town, but that's because of that cyanobacteria bloom late in the season. So basically, when we get permits through the state every year, the DEP pesticide use permits or the WMO4s, And so those have a condition on them that basically said, if there's a public health advisory, no treatment is allowed. So, variety of reasons, I think, for that. Could be applicator safety, so on and so forth, but we're not allowed to treat. And so that window basically covered our Phragmites window. But the good thing is there was very little Phragmites regrowth because we got really, really good systemic control. I think Jess even reached out and was like, we see this dead stuff, was that a homeowner or was that part of your treatment? It was us,
Yeah.
it was Phragmites that we were contracted to treat.
Somebody contacted you, these dead things.
Yep. Yep.
And we're looking at, I think that's.
So dead Phragmites. Now,
That's what you paid for.
Exactly. And so initially, I want to say Joanne had asked about Phragmites in Pine Meadow Pond. So that entire northern area, so that's all cattail. So those are all native cattails, so we didn't touch those. Just kind of is nature being nature, right? It's a pond kind of working its way to a wetland, and we want to preserve open water habitat. We want to create open water habitat, but we're really not going to be able to, nor would I recommend killing off all those cattails. If it was all Phragmites, I definitely want to kill them, stop the spread, but that's all cattail.
Yeah.
So those are all left untouched and natural, and so we're basically just trying to create and preserve open water habitat, which is a great segue to lilies, right? Lilies are native. They're always a gray area with our industry because you get the people that are, it's native, don't touch it, right? But lilies are one where if they cover entire ponds like a Flanagan or a Pine Meadow especially, they'll limit oxygen exchange, they'll limit, diversity, so on and so forth. So they do have negative implications. And so really the plan with the lilies is to just try and scale them back, keep them at bay, scattered patches around the edges versus covering entire ponds or large areas. So that's the plan with lilies. Now, brings me to diversity. I think the good thing is, and hopefully it was clear in the report there, the good thing is we're starting to see a lot of natives, right, in these ponds, the ribbonleaf pondweeds, the snail seed pondweeds, bladderwort, things like that coming back, whereas really, especially Flanagan, Pine Meadow, were really dominated by invasive species. Sandy, not so much. I love sandy ponds, despite the cyanobacteria bloom, but we are starting to see that diversity increase, which is really what we want to do. We want to knock out those invasives, control those invasives, and allow the natives to really recolonize and establish themselves. And so it's good because, we can be rate specific with our herbicides, right? So sonar is one. If we wanted to control water lilies, let's say, with sonar, we would have to maintain 20 plus parts per billion in these areas, whereas we can control fanwort by maintaining 8 parts per billion, right? And so even diquat, right? There's certain species like bladderwort, some of the hardier pondweeds really need to go at max label rate of 2 gallons per surface acre to control those, whereas we can control curly leaf pondweed with 1 gallon per acre. So it really does allow us to be selective without wiping out everything and really trying to target the invasive targets as best we can. So this year, it went pretty well until that cyanobacteria bloom at Sandy Pond, which I really wasn't even aware of. I think I went to notify both of you and somebody said, oh, are you aware that, that they had a public health advisory at Sandy Pond? And I was like, wow, I really didn't even, if I was going to pick one, it wouldn't have been Sandy Pond that I would have bet on for that to happen. Now I know, and you guys would know more about this than me, but I think Sandy Pond was treated with alum way back when, maybe decade or more ago. Yeah, decades ago, I think Sandy Pond was treated with alum. You'll have to look back, but something, I'm reasonably confident of that. Don't ask me where I got it from, but I'm reasonably confident that Sandy Pond was treated with alum at some point.
What is that?
So alum is not an herbicide, it's not an algicide, it's a chemical. And what it does is it binds with phosphorus. And so it essentially strips phosphorus out of the water column. And if you go at a high enough dose, it'll actually form a flock, which is basically a cover. It'll seal the bottom sediments from phosphorus release, which is where you get a lot of that internal recycling. So maybe it does have a phosphorus problem, maybe it doesn't, but if you think about algae, right, very simple, what does it take for an algae bloom? Water. You obviously have it, it's a pond. Sunlight, we had a lot of that in 2022. And then the third thing is nutrients. So I think in that year-end report, you know, a lot of the recommendations specific to algae were kind of, well, we don't know, right? Because we don't, you know, you could make a reasonable assumption that sandy pond may have elevated phosphorus, which is really that limiting nutrient fueling algae blooms, but you just don't know, right? It could have been an anomaly. It could have just been, again, you know, stagnant conditions with warm water temperatures and, you know, just a variety of things, right? It's us against Mother Nature, but I'd love to see some sort of at least nutrient sampling, you know, in some of the ponds or at least sandy.
The DPW does some sampling regularly. I think in the aftermath of that geosyntech report study we did. So we might check with Dan.
Yeah.
To see if they have phosphorus levels.
I think usually reluctantly pessimistic, right? Only because lots of times, especially with swimming beaches, recreational beaches and things, they're like, oh, we sample. Usually it's for E. coli, bacteria, things like that, for the safety of the swimmers, but you rarely see phosphorus. But that would be something to look into, right? Because if you know your phosphorus is elevated, then you can really start to get to the root of the problem. Now, the good thing is it's not a consistent, right? We work on a lot of lakes where if they do nothing, they're going to get shut down. It's just inevitable, right? Or ones that you always see it pea soup green. Now, the other thing with this bloom is, was it ever tested, do you know, or was it just visually assessed and shut down?
No, the state was testing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they did get high.
Yeah.
Did they just test for chlorophyll, or did they actually do like an algae ID enumeration?
I wouldn't be able to say.
I don't know, because that went through the Board of Health.
Yep.
But there was
Because
something
it was the Department of
that's-
Public Health that did the testing and shut it down. So the health agent would know, but I don't know 100% sure.
Yeah, I mean, just
Did it.
something to think about, right? Because algae is part of an ecosystem, right? You're always going to have algae. What you don't want is the blue-greens, right? Your potential toxin producers. And so there are, you know, actual Board of Health, you know, thresholds for cyanobacteria counts.
Like 80,000 per something.
Yeah, so 70,000 cells per milliliter is
and
your...
I think about a week before they lifted it, it was down to 100,000.
Okay,
But
yeah,
it
so
was
pretty bad,
million.
yeah. I mean,
That's what
I've seen, you know, I see millions
Yeah.
sometimes, but yeah, 70,000. So two cell counts that we really look at are 20,000 is kind of, hey, it's concerning. It can lead to itching and irritation of the skin, things like that. It's basically like this is a problem. It warrants management at 20,000, and we're still allowed to treat at 20,000.
Yeah.
Once 70,000 happens, which is what happened in 2022 at Sandy Pond, you're shut down, right? And so they really don't want us to treat because they think if you kill off too much algae too quickly, then potential toxins could go airborne. And so that's kind of the fear there. So you're basically left in the position we were left in, which is just, let's wait it out, right? Let's wait it out and just see what happens. But, you know, again, it isn't a consistent problem like a lot of the ponds we work on. I mean, you may never see another bloom until we, you know, for a decade, or you know, I mean, but if it does start to become a problem, especially, and even if it doesn't start to become a problem, right, just based on 2022 alone, you know, I think it does warrant some sort of sampling, you know, from a nutrient perspective. You can always sample,
Do
you know.
understand the numbers?
I do, yeah.
Let's see. Because this was from the 2016 geosyntech report they did. That was some of their they had a whole chapter on
Okay.
phosphorus loading, which I can look at those numbers and go, numbers.
Lots of zeros.
Hmm?
Lots of zeros.
No, I don't know.
Little thingies.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I know these numbers. These are more like watershed assessments, so
Yeah.
you're loading, whereas we typically look at your total phosphorus and your free reactive phosphorus within the water column or coming in. Phosphorus load. Yeah, it doesn't, not necessarily what I'd be looking for, but Oh, actually, no, never mind. Never mind. We do have some viable. So Sandy, you have 28 parts per billion, right? Well, 28 and change. We could either round up or round down. 28.87 parts per billion of total phosphorus average. So what does that mean, right? Basically anything, there's different thresholds, but we typically strive to keep it under, say, 20. But anything greater than 20, 25 is sufficient enough to stimulate excessive plant and algae growth. So that was Sandy. Pine Meadow, a little bit lower, right? It was 21, which is, it's fine. We see 1,000 parts per billion. I mean, so just to put it into context, you're walking the line, right? If we were to say, hey, this is the line to keep it under, you're like sitting on top of it, right? And so it's not like it's dire straits. And so sometimes in that case, I think more sampling is always beneficial. Trying to figure out sources of phosphorus. Is it internal loading or is it external? Maybe some samples at some of the tributaries, right? Is it coming in from upstream? And so if that's the case, we do have, I think we put something in the report about it. There's filters we can put into tributaries. They're like $200, $250. I mean, so very inexpensive, that basically filter out free reactive phosphorus. And so free reactive phosphorus is the phosphorus form that really, you could almost consider it future algae. So it's basically the phosphorus form that's readily available for algae uptake. So you can almost predict a bloom if your free reactive phosphorus is really elevated. You're like, yep, you're primed for a bloom. And so these filters, they're called Utrosorb filters, basically filter out free reactive phosphorus. And so when you're kind of skating the line like that, small adjustments, can really go a long way. Public education, I think, however you implement that, I mean, it's never easy, but just information to the abutters, things like that, about what to do and what not to do. I mean, you can never really force them, unless they were to come in front of you for an NOI and you conditioned it or something like that. But, it's difficult, right? I mean, it's difficult to force them to say no fertilizer, They should.
We tried that.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing.
The state turned us down.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And I don't blame you for trying, right? But it's one of those things, they should hopefully want to do it for the health of the water body that they're on. The challenge there, though, is everybody thinks about, direct abutters. If we were to, I don't know if you've ever used USGS Stream Stats, but it's a free application. You can just Google it, USGS Stream Stats, and you click your state, and then you click delineate, right? And you're delineating the watershed, and then it just has you pick a point, right? So you'll see all these lines running through Sandy Pond, let's say, and you pick one, and it'll show you the watershed for that specific point, which in many cases is miles, right? And so, even if your direct abutters are super compliant, it definitely helps, especially when you're walking the line like that, but you got to understand that the watershed is probably huge. And so it's challenging. And that's why some of those filters, if you have it all funneling to one point, or a few points throughout the lake, you can filter out some of that phosphorus and make large adjustments. But I do think, just subtle impacts to beneficial buffers, just teaching people, hey, don't mow down to your shoreline. I know you want grass right down, but it's not the healthy thing to do for the water body. Even if it's just a higher mow, a 3 to 5 foot strip where you're mowing it, just trimming it, keeping your grass clippings out of the lake, keeping your leaves out of the lake. I mean, not fertilizing, and everybody thinks, organic fertilizers, it's all designed to make your grass grow. So none of it is good.
What was the website, sorry?
So USGS Stream Stats, and Stream Stats is one word. It's a super, super cool application. I probably should have thought to run those watersheds beforehand, but it's one of those things that it's almost discouraging because you see how big the watershed is and you're like, well, how do I get to everybody in this watershed, especially if they don't live on, like you live on Sandy Pond, Jess, right? Yeah, so you care.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the thing, you have a vested interest and you care, but the challenge is, all these other people that don't live on Sandy Pond, I mean, we run into it in condo HOAs where there's a 1 acre pond and there's 5 homes on it and there's 200 units, and the 5 homes want to manage the pond and the other 195 don't care because they don't see it, and so But
Why would,
Sounds
if
like
you
our
could tell me,
annual budget request.
why would Flanagan's, it didn't seem to have that algae bloom in Flanagan's, and it's connected. I mean, it's downstream.
yeah, you know, I mean, it's a different water body. It's not getting the full water turnover. You know what I mean? I mean, honestly, it's a tough question to answer without having proper data. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it is a different water body. I mean, yes, it's hydraulically connected, but you're talking different depths, different sediment depths, sediment releasing phosphorus, you know, different inlets, different water turnover, different plant communities, different uses. I mean, geese and things like that can really be a factor.
Yeah. I was just surprised.
But
it wasn't there.
yeah, I mean, I would have bet on Flanagan if I bet on a pond to get a bloom. It would have been Flanagan's because it's so nutrient rich. You know, it had all those plants. They're all dying off. It's so shallow. It's just really mucky, nutrient rich muck. I mean, that's what I would have bet on versus kind of that deeper, you know, kind of kettle hole style of sandy pond.
Does that muck have to be disturbed with which to have that phosphorus?
No.
No?
Nope.
Because I guess I was just thinking more about the
The
activity. of
recreational
Sandy Pond.
use. Yeah, no.
Right.
Nope.
The people's jet skiing and everything all over.
Nope.
So,
Yeah, I mean, it's constantly releasing phosphorus, internal recycling, but that's internal, right?
the
And you don't
alum didn't
know.
work.
Well, you just don't know. Do you have an internal problem? Do you have an external problem?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, all I know is that geosyntac, those numbers, I mean, they really are helpful because they show you that you're walking the line, which to me is good, right? I mean, we deal with ponds where you're talking 100, 150 parts per billion of phosphorus, and you know, you really need something like alum to make a difference. Otherwise, you're going to constantly get blooms versus you guys where you're at that point where subtle changes, some public education, maybe some, you know, Utrasorb filters, things like that. Once we have the proper data to support that those would work, you know, in those ponds, you know, can really go a long way.
If you did the filter.
Yeah.
What kind of filters again?
Yep, so we use two. So we use biochar, which is basically an activated carbon type product. It's in a porous sock. It's just a big black bag, and it has an activated carbon product. Now that filters out a wide array of contaminants. I prefer, specifically for phosphorus, Utrasorb filters, so EUTROSORB filters. They're about 2 feet long. So they're good for stormwater outfalls. I mean, we deal with some, you know, inner city ponds like in Quincy, where they have just all these stormwater outfalls catching all the runoff and everything, and we can just put a filter right there at that stormwater outfall. It's perfect. But in an actual tributary, you know, where you have a stream that's somewhat wide, somewhat deep, you need multiple. So we have a couple sites. We have one in Sterling where they have several tributaries, and we put the Utrasorb in there. But there is actual data to support that they actually do filter out the free reactive phosphorus. But little things like that, I mean, a couple $100, you know what I mean, versus dredging for, you know, 100 million, something like
so
that.
if we were to use that filter on Flanagan, is it the connection between Sandy Pond and Flanagan where we put that in?
You know, I don't know.
Okay.
So usually I mean, you can do sampling kind of when you're using those to try and figure out, like, is this the spot? I mean, in an ideal world, right? Like, we have one called Pillings Pond in Linfield that we do for the Linfield Conservation Commission. They have one dedicated tributary called Bates Brook. It's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. And so it's just bringing in this super, super, super nutrient-rich water. I mean, you're talking 80 to 120 parts per billion of phosphorus. And if you look at the USGS stream stats, you basically see like everything funneling to Bates Brook, and you're like, okay, that is a major contributor to my phosphorus problem. But we knew all this ahead of time, right? And so based on that, we say, okay, based on your width and your depth, they have 10 filters in there. They do need to be swapped out like every 3 to 4 months. You know, but you're talking, right, 10 filters, $250 a piece, swap them out once a season. It's $5,000 to really make a pretty significant impact in terms of phosphorus versus, you know, $100 million to dredge and remove all that nutrient-rich muck, or, you know, catch basins or major engineering changes when you're dealing with roads and all these things. So
Right.
it is
that's
something.
3 to 5 months based on a a flow that's at a 5 times the level that we're
Yeah, I
seeing.
mean, we kind of gauge it. So we do have ways to test these filters as well. We do have testing kits where we can actually open them up, remove some of the media, and then we spike water with phosphorus essentially. And so we spike it so we know we have 100 parts per billion of phosphorus, and then we run it through media that was actually removed from that actual filter that's in place.
Yep.
And then you test it after, and we should technically have 50 or less parts per billion if we added 100, because you're supposed to cut about half. So,
Okay.
so if we don't see that and you're still getting 100 after, you're like, okay, this is saturated. It's got to be swapped out.
Right.
Whereas, let's say 2022, we deployed a lot of these things, and they were dry all year. So, you know, I mean, we had one East Lake Washacum in Sterling, and they had several rounds of replacement, and we're just like, no water's passed through this thing. It's like the absolute worst case study, because we didn't actually get any flow, but
You know, Sandy Pond has a lot of side streets that run downhill to
Yep.
the pond, and so they get sheet flow during some of the heavier climate change related downpours we have.
yep.
And you get some gullying and then water going directly into the pond. Can filters like this be used?
Yep.
In
Yeah. So we use them in, we have a pond called Parker Pond in Barnstable. And we deal with homeowners on the west side of the pond, and they're in the unfortunate position. It's about a 13-acre pond, so it's a decent sized pond. It's not a golf course pond, but they're on the west side, right? All homes on the west side. On the east side is all golf course, right up to the shoreline. And I mean, we've seen the golf course like pumping water in, and I mean, just crazy stuff. But we basically documented areas where they're not buffered. They do have some woods, they do have some buffer, but then they have right next to one of the, I think it's a tee box right there, but right next to that tee box, which is up on the hill, they have this just grassy slope, no buffer at all whatsoever. And so we staged some Utrosorb filters there to basically catch some of that golf course runoff in that area that's specifically not buffered. And so prior to that, though, we did some sampling, right? We did mid-pond, surface, bottom, so we can try and document, right? Do you have a lot of phosphorus release, which would spike your bottom sample, surface sample, which is kind of just giving you that average within the pond. And then we sampled over there on that east side, northeast side, where there's no buffer, where it's all golf course runoff. Literally, if you look at the stream stats there, it's just the golf course. That's all they're getting. And we sampled it during a rain event and got some of that, and wouldn't you know it, phosphorus was double in that sample, right? And so we documented, hey, this is the spot, and so we strategically put the Utrosorb filters there. But yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's a little bit tougher to do that if it's more just like flow, open flow versus it all funneling to a storm drain, to a culvert, to an outfall pipe, where you can just put one right in front of it, where all that water gets funneled to a single point and then passes through the filter and then enters the pond.
What happens to those filters when they're done? Can they be reused, cleaned and reused?
No, they basically just say throw them in a landfill, so we just put them in our dumpster.
Yeah.
But now with biochar is, again, that activated carbon media. They say recycle it and use it, to grow your grass or whatever, right? Because it's one of those things that now it's so nutrient rich, it's taken all those nutrients out of the pond you want to remove them from, but when you're trying to grow grass, they say, oh, put it in a spreader, spread it and put your seed down. And so,
go right back into the pond.
well, I wouldn't advise it in a watershed, you know what I mean? But like if you're a golf course, I mean, they take them out and they use it, but of course they have their golf course ponds, and they're basically just never-ending circle of a problem, right? But
does road salt that towns use in the winter, does that contribute to phosphorus?
I think it depends on the ingredients and the actual product they're using. I don't necessarily think so. I mean, we have seen chloride spikes at some of more the like inner city ponds or those urban areas like Winchester. We have one that we manage, and they have high chloride, and it's from all the road salts. But so oh yeah, isn't it awesome?
Oh, yeah.
It's free, and it's free,
It's cool.
But yeah, free apps are the best. But you can pull, if you use that data to your advantage, right? And I think I probably should have thought to do it, but we can pull a stream stats for a sandy pond, a Flanagan pond, a Pine Meadow for free. I mean, you could do it, but I can definitely do it, and we can kind of see, okay, what's the watershed, and does it kind of bring us to a specific point? Because that would be where you may want to consider filters, because you guys are the prime candidate, because you're not to the point where it's like, you have all these problems and super, super, super high phosphorus. You're at that tipping point where you can really make a huge impact with the public education program, or a couple $250 filters, or just looking at some buffer areas that are maybe town-owned or something like that, and saying, hey, even if we don't have the money to do $10,000 worth of plantings or bring in a wetland scientist to do a planting plan, we can just kind of up our mow, right? Tell DPW, if you're mowing this area, just up it, right? Mow it to or mow it once a year instead of mowing it every week. So, and then those field notes, hopefully, do you circulate those field notes when I send them, or?
I haven't been, no. I know Jess gets them, I get them. But yeah, no,
Okay.
I'll tell the board commission when we get them,
Okay.
what has happened.
Yeah, so one thing we're pretty proud of as a company, it was my idea for the last 10 years and nobody listened to me, and then when I started my own company, I was like, you know what, I'm doing this. Yeah, so I coded.
Marked up.
Yeah, so I'm not a tech guy, but I coded this app that allows the guys in the trucks to essentially put together field reports of what they saw, what they did, why they did it, photos, temperature, dissolved oxygen, Secchi disc clarity measurements, pH if they have a pH meter with them. And then we get those out a day or two after the treatment. And the only reason for the delay is because all of them go through me. So I proof them all and get them out. But I think the important thing there, not only for you guys, but for everybody, every pond we work on, is we're always, I can't tell you how many times we said in a field note this year, not at any of your ponds, but at some of our ponds, it's like, hey, there was grass clippings everywhere, or, hey, there's huge piles of leaves, not naturally falling from trees, somebody dumped them in, or something as simple as hey, this area, really doesn't have a proper buffer, just mow it less or mow it higher, even if it's just a 3 to 5 foot strip. It's just little changes, but we try and use those field notes throughout the season to really educate all our clients.
That's what we need, education.
Yeah, I think we'll just have to make sure everybody gets the field notes. Yeah. So
yeah, and for next year, I can always post those, so we can have on the website for every year, and then just change out the calendar.
Yeah,
every year.
Walpole posts theirs.
Yeah, we'll do that this year.
Do you ever participate in public forums?
Yeah, I prefer days, but yeah, weekdays.
Yeah.
Me too.
But yeah, we do, we do, and we tried to be when we opened our company, I think, it was getting, the industry as a whole was getting away from the science, right, and the education, and I think that was our little niche there, was more of just, let's try and not be the big bad, herbicide applicators, and be the herbicides are a tool, but just one of the tools in our mission to really preserve these water bodies and improve the health, So we definitely do a lot of that. We've done, I think I have something going on with Canton. Regan Milani over there, the agent, is part of some. Yeah, she's awesome. But she's part of some conservation group, and she's like, oh, would you ever do a lunch and learn?
That's the one I do.
So yeah, so I think she's gonna have me in to do
nice.
Some slides and a talk that way. But that's hopefully then you guys can disperse some of that information to the people that are actually on these water bodies and in these watersheds, and then hopefully they listen. But
So if we offer you lunch, that would be just kind of sweeten the pot for you?
if it's a weekday,
Yeah.
I'll take it. I'll take it, yeah. But
She needs cookies.
but yeah, any questions or anything on any of the weeds, algae, the ponds?
So going back to things that Pine Mountain, right, with the cattails.
Yep.
So I guess I got the impression that you got the impression from us that we wanted to get the cattails.
No,
along.
no. I think Joanne just mistook the cattails for frag, or somebody said that there was frag there.
Okay.
Because when we went out there, we expected all frag, the whole field of frag, because you can see it on the satellite, right? You
Yeah.
pull it up on the imagery and you're like, whoa, okay, that's all frag. And then you get out there and you're like, whoa, it's not frag, it's all cattail. There's not a single Phragmites plant there. I mean, we can treat cattails, and we do on occasion. It's just, you know, they're a native species, and so you're always, again, walking that line. Do you scale them back a little bit? Do you just leave them? For all frag, it's an
So
easy
the-
decision.
So my question was about what you just said about the scale them back a bit.
Yep.
So is there a concern that if they were to, you know, expand, is that would go totally like to just basically a
You know,
wetland, like a
They're not going to
lawn?
grow in more than like 2.5, 3 feet of water max.
Okay.
And although Pine Meadow isn't deep, I mean, I think they're almost at that point where they're probably not going to encroach any further. But yeah, I mean, I think the whole point of a pond management program is to, you know, preserve your beautiful wetlands, your cattails, but also preserve that open water habitat that you have for the fish, the other wildlife,
Right.
you know, foraging birds, so on and so forth. And so you always have to just, I think we always look at that as pond managers when we're out there, right? So everybody that's been on your ponds has at least 10 years of experience, right? So they're all always looking and always making suggestions. I mean, that would probably be something that would find its way in a field note if we were like, hey, we get out here and the cattails have significantly expanded. We don't want to wipe them out by any means, but we want to just pull them back to where they were,
Okay.
you know, before they encroach any
But
further.
you're not seeing that right now. You know.
I mean, they're covering like a third of the pond, but
Okay.
it kind of just is what it is, right? They're native, it's nice habitat, you still have plenty of open water habitat, which is being preserved. So I think you're kind of just in that situation, but yeah, I don't know if you'd want to go more than
Let
that,
them
you
do
know?
too much more. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Do you map it from satellite?
We could, yeah. So we do a native map. I'm not sure if he included just a big polygon there for cattails, but yeah, we're always using GPS when we're out there mapping, you know, mapping all the natives and the invasives. You probably see all those dots, you know, on all those maps, but little deceiving this year on the post maps because, like, especially Flanagan, you still see several dots in the post treatment map for fanwort and things, but we bolded that those were maybe 2 plants and they were very sickly looking, you know. So we mapped them, but they were not abundant and not dense and not healthy. So
That's good.
Can I ask a question?
absolutely.
Yeah, I live on Flanagan Road.
Okay.
And after some of the treatments this past year, there were islands of dead weeds.
Yep.
And isn't that just gonna decay and make the pond shallower?
Yeah, so what you're probably seeing is, and it's common when you use sonar, especially in areas where there's dense lilies. So are you on the east side?
Yes.
I figured, yeah. So what you're dealing with on that east side is it's all dense lilies and very shallow. And so you see it less when you use Clipper or other products, but because we're using sonar in that area to control fanwort, what happens is it'll impact the lilies, not a ton, but it impacts them enough where those rhizomes become weak and the gases escape and they detach from the surface. So when I say rhizomes, I mean the lily roots. They almost look like a tree branch.
Yes.
They're thick.
I've seen them.
And so those will detach, rise to the surface, and they pull just bottom muck with them. So it's not actually dead or decaying weeds or anything. It's muck that was already there that just rose to the surface. And it's just one of those things that when using sonar in an area like that, it's a prime candidate where you do see some of those floating islands. Lots of times they'll break up on their own or sink in the winter. I mean, if they really became a nuisance, sometimes we'll go out and break them up. But they are really good habitat. You probably see a lot of waterfowl using
Yes.
them and things like that. It's definitely not ideal, but that's what you're seeing is lily rhizomes that have risen to the surface and kind of pulled bottom muck with them.
Where it was shallow, so shallow last year, it was hard to get out of the pond at some point.
Yep.
So,
Yep. I mean, the only way to reclaim any depth or anything like that would be some sort of a dredging or mass sediment removal. But then you're talking 401 water quality. You know, you're talking Army Corps of Engineers. You're talking, you know, where's the material going to go? You're talking Mass DEP standards for testing. I mean, so just to even get to the point where you could dredge, you're talking probably $100,000 or more in just pre-work and then your dredging, would be millions.
Yeah.
And so it's almost just virtually impossible. I think what we have to try and do is just maintain whatever open water we can, but we do put a focus on that area. I mean, it's challenging because it's just dense lilies, and we're using sonar out there for the fan wort, and so you tend to see some of those rhizomes just floating up.
2 years ago, I guess you did a heavy treatment because you had 2 strips
Yep.
going through the middle of the lily pads.
Yep.
Kind of like there's a clearing there. And
Yep.
I guess they didn't do it this past year.
So that was the year we used sonar pretty extensively, and so what you probably saw was some thinning there, and then we had to leave a buffer in that area that year. There was a swan's nest, and they got a complaint, so we had told Joanne we would kind of just leave a buffer around it, which probably impacted that a little bit too. But yeah, I think, so we do several treatments, right? And so one later in the season is specific to water lilies. And so it's always late, and everybody always sees lilies all summer, and then, what about the lilies? When are you going to treat the lilies? So it has to be late for a few reasons, because one, we need the lilies at the top of the water column. We need them actually above the surface, one. And then two, at that point in the season, they're sending all their energy downwards because they're not actively growing, right? They're trying to get ready for winter, versus in the spring and the summer, they're still growing, so all that energy is moving upwards. And so late in the season, say August, September, we usually pair it with our post-treatment survey. We do a lily-specific treatment where we actually spray the lilies in the areas we want to take them out. And so you probably might have seen some of that too, is some strips there, because again, we don't want to eliminate lilies.
Yeah.
You just want to scale them back, try and make it recreationally friendly, leave some cover. It's always walking the line, but I guess my thought is this: if you ever have a concern or maybe a request, right? You can always just call or email on those posters.
Yeah.
It'll always go to me. We're a small company, so you can just be like, hey, treat the lilies out, and I'll probably say, yep, where do you live? We'll make sure we hit yours,
Okay.
But
Sir, can we ask your name for the...
Frank Macklin.
Frank?
Macklin.
Thank you.
Yeah. 43 Groton Harvard Road.
perfect. Well, now I can put a face to the name if you reach out, but
You probably talked to my wife.
maybe I know. So
She usually calls when she sees the signs.
Yeah, so we post a week ahead of time. We send someone out a week ahead of time to post the ponds, and so I know all the guys have had a lot of good conversations with all the abutters, and they're all pretty energetic and enthused, and maybe that's where we should hand out little public education brochures. But
When I had to go out and do for the closing of the beach with the algae bloom, yeah, everyone I talked to, they were all super nice and friendly.
yeah, especially when the town's paying to preserve their ponds, so.
We're glad you're there.
Yeah. Well, hopefully this year again too. I know you got to put it out to bid every year, but we're hoping to keep you. So.
Those floating islands of rhizomes,
Yep.
can you just hook onto those things and pull them to shore?
Yeah. Just for the most part.
Can we hook onto them and pull them over to the sandy pond?
Need any help?
What, do you live on Flanagan?
Yes.
I got ya. Yeah, I mean, you could break them up with a pitchfork. I mean, you could literally take a small, little small 5-horse motor like what we use on our John boats and just kind of drag them to shore, break them up. I mean, they could be mechanically removed. I mean, definitely expensive. They're not bad by any means, right? It's rhizomes that have risen to the surface. It's just, maybe it's an eyesore, maybe it's it's in the way, but they're not bad. I mean, you'll definitely see all sorts of waterfowl and egrets and all sorts of birds and things on those, and turtles. I mean, they love them. So
You said they sink back down, but they are dead.
Sometimes they sink. Usually, what you'll see is them sink in the fall or the winter. Maybe not when it's 65 degrees in February, but
they don't regrow, right? They're dead. They're done.
all it is muck. So it's basically kind of dying or dead rhizomes that have detached from the bottom.
Yeah.
So those big kind of tree branch structures that are all commingled, and they pulled all that muck with them. So what you really see from the surface is just like a big mud blob that rose to the surface, and that's just bottom muck pulled up there by rhizomes. Exactly. They release the gases and they rise to the surface. But you tend to see it in really mucky, shallow areas with dense lilies growing upon lilies upon lilies upon lilies, especially when using sonar. Sonar, just because of that slow kind of impact to them, they just kind of, it doesn't really kill the lilies, they just kind of become brittle. I mean, it could kill lilies, again, 20 parts per billion, we can kill lilies with sonar, but we're maintaining like 8 to 10. So it's really just kind of making them weak, and the gases escape and they release. And so it's really just that area specifically is primed for floating islands. But like in Sandy, I think we scaled back the lilies, but it's less mucky, kind of sandy bottom, deep, you know, and you're really never going to see floating islands there, I would doubt.
Yeah, I've never seen one.
No.
You know,
If some appear, I'm gonna know why.
We're on it.
Do you have any other questions?
No, that's good, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Do the commissioners have any questions?
Yeah, we had a resident come talk to us in December.
It was November. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was the end of November.
Who had a different opinion than I think most of us, that the pond treatments weren't working at all, which we
Well, let me stop you there too.
Yeah.
I guess we see a lot of people that think we're supposed to kill all vegetation,
yeah.
right? Which we're not. Like, you know,
Yeah.
so they'll see bladderwort and be like, look, it's milfoil, you know?
Well, this resident doesn't want us to kill anything, really.
Oh.
She doesn't want us to use chemicals
Chemicals.
at all.
Okay.
She was asking about, she was saying that there's some ponds that they harvest the muck and sell it.
Nobody's ever been able to sell the muck. No
Okay.
way. No way. You know, the challenge with your ponds especially,
Yeah.
because again, we do an alternatives analysis every year. When we do those recommendations, we're not just like copying and pasting recommendations, right? It's, all right, what can we do differently? Are there any new technologies? Should they be considering something else? And then we put those recommendations on paper.
Yeah.
So I guess what you can convey to some of those people is, you know, all options have been considered, right? And so first option is you always consider something like a hand pulling or a dash, which is diver assisted suction harvesting. So divers go down, hand pull individual plants. But as you can imagine, when you start to get to acres, really anything greater than a quarter acre or 100 stems per acre, and that's kind of per DCR guidelines, it just becomes infeasible from, you know, a variety of perspectives, including a cost perspective, to do dash on an entire pond. I mean, it's just impossible. So then you kind of consider, okay, are there any mechanical alternatives available?
Yeah.
But those are ruled out for all 3 of your ponds because all your invasive species targets spread through fragmentation. So if you're putting a high-powered piece of equipment in there, whether it be to remove muck or plants or invasive species, whether it be a harvester, which doesn't disturb the bottom, it's kind of like a floating lawnmower that cuts the plants, or a hydro rake or something like that that removes muck, things with it, you're ultimately using a high-powered piece of equipment that's chopping up all these plants, and then fragments escape, and now they reroot themselves, and now you've just spread the problem. And so that gets ruled out versus, you know, early season treatments, minimizing biomass, herbicides that allow us to be selective. And the other big thing with herbicides is it's not like it's straight herbicide, right? It's not like you're drinking it out of the container, right? You're diluting it down to the parts per billion concentrations. So it's so heavily diluted. I mean, not that anything we use is Windex, but I always use the analogy, right? Like you would never drink Windex out of the bottle, but if you dump it in 2 billion gallons worth of water and then you drink that water, it's basically such a trace concentration if it's even detectable. And so those are the types of concentrations we're using, you know, with those herbicides. So
I'm just quoting what this resident was saying, and we don't know if she's accurate in this, but that Littleton on Spectacle Pond got rid of chemicals and shifted to eco-harvesting, using C&D underwater out of Connecticut. They brought devices that mechanically pull the weeds, roots and all. Took about 5 days on a 70-acre pond. Over 100 tons of material were trucked to Dirt Doctor in Acton, and we paid them around $400.
We'll pay them what?
$400.
Dirt Doctor, not the eco harvesting is probably like 2,500 to 3,000 a day.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you know, that may be true, right? Eco harvesting is definitely a thing. So there's harvesters. Eco harvesters are different because A traditional harvester essentially has blades. It's just cutting.
Yeah.
It's just cutting, mowing the lawn. An eco harvester is essentially a rolling drum. And so it has a pinch point. So the idea is that it pinches the weeds and pulls them up, and they go up a conveyor, and supposedly it pulls them by the roots. Now I can tell you that I know a lot about eco harvesting because we were considering buying one, and we got really, really close until we, one, saw one in action, which we really wanted to do before we spent that kind of money. Two, we talked to Dr. Ken Wagner, who's like the world-renowned limnologist who's out of Western Mass, but he's, you know, the best in the industry. Ken Wagner. So Ken, not from an efficacy perspective, but Ken's like, they don't travel well, meaning a commercial company like us who's going to bring it from pond to pond, it's aluminum, it's not going to hold up. But then we went and saw one in action, and it was literally just floating fragments everywhere, which the whole sell of an eco harvester versus a traditional harvester was supposed to be that, oh, it pulls the plants, it doesn't break the plants, it doesn't fragment them, it pulls them up. And literally we went out and saw, it might have been that same company out of Connecticut, we saw it, and they had like people in kayaks with like pool skimmers trying to skim up weeds, but there was just weeds everywhere. Yeah. And that's the fragmentation that we would want to avoid with any sort of mechanical. Now, I don't know what the targets are in Spectacle Pond, right? Because certain plants really are conducive to mechanical removal, but fanwort, milfoil, and curly-leaf pondweed are not. So it's always target specific.
This was specifically fanwort and milfoil.
Yeah, I mean, you could do anything, right? I mean, you could eco harvest. Yeah. Are you going to get results? Are you know? So it's one of those things that
it looks like this coming year.
They may or may not be doing it, but they're probably spending, you know, though eco harvesters can probably do about an acre a day. Right? Yeah. So if they did 5 days, they probably did 5 acres. They have 5 acres worth of problems, which to me is scary, because if it's 5 acres in, say, a 80 acre water body, what did she say, 80?
70.
Right? 70, okay. So you got 5 acres worth of problems, assuming you got all of it in 5 days. Are you now going to have 20 acres worth of problems because you just went and spread that problem? You know, I don't know, but...
We also had suggested sterilized carp.
Yeah, so those are prohibited in Massachusetts for a variety of reasons.
We mentioned that multiple times.
Yeah, actually, I was just at Northeast Aquatic Plant Management Society conference a couple weeks ago, and there was a whole like couple presentations on grass carp, because they are allowed in Connecticut, and so they basically took 3 case studies from Connecticut, and there's literally no vegetation in any of those lakes, period, and it's constant algae blooms. And that's the problem, right? They're uncontrollable. They tend to eat native vegetation before they'll ever turn to invasive vegetation like fanwort milfoil, right? It's like if I have broccoli in front of me and pizza, I'm always going to eat that pizza before I eat the broccoli. And it's like, they want me to eat the broccoli, I'm always going to eat the pizza, and only after I eat the pizza will I eat the broccoli. And so that's the thing with grass carp. So then you have no vegetation, you have excess nutrients, not healthy habitat, and so it was basically just destroyed the ecosystem to the point where now those lakes are trying to replant native vegetation.
And then in our case, we've got chained ponds, so there's like, there's no guarantee you keep them where you want.
Well, yeah, I mean, even in Connecticut, you have to modify your outlet structures to make sure that they're contained and so on and so forth. But
and did no one see Jurassic Park?
Not in a while.
Not in a while.
The sterilized dinosaurs didn't stay sterile.
Yep.
Yeah. But,
yeah, and they're bottom dwellers, so you tend to see murkier water. So your typically crystal clear water that you have in Sandy Pond is, would be no more.
Yeah, I read that their own carp's fecal waste can trigger algae blooms itself. So.
Now, one other thing I think to think about is, do we or do you have at least a contingency plan in place if there is a bloom, right? And again, I don't think you're a prime candidate for consistent blooms, but in the event, let's say that Sandy Pond bloom was caught early, could we have gone in there with a copper sulfate treatment, which is commonly used in drinking water, and just kind of nipped it in the bud at that point before it got shut down, right?
How do you detect it early?
So there's a few things, but if I guess, is copper part of that order of conditions, or could it be? At least that way it would be allowed, would be something to look into. That's one. But 2, it could be detected visual observation. One thing that's easy to do I mean, maybe you could handle Flanagan and you could handle Sandy, but is Secchi disc measurements. So I don't know if you've ever used a Secchi disc, but it's that black and white disc, black and white quadrants. And so you put it in the water until you lose visibility of it. And so you probably see in our report some Secchi measurements. And I want to say Sandy was, 13, 14 feet at the beginning of the season. But if you were to do a Secchi towards the tail end, when you had that bloom, it was like 2 inches, right? And something tells me that bloom didn't just, it could happen overnight. I mean, essentially that's how quickly cyanobacteria reproduce, but it probably didn't. There were probably signs at that point, right? Because we have a gap, right? We do that June treatment, and we kind of go out there in May, we do the sonar and the pre-survey, we go out there in June, do all the submerged weeds, but then we're not back until like August to do the lilies phragmites. So there's that gap, and that's when that bloom was starting. So we didn't have any professional eyes on it, but could it have been detected, right, through something like, hey, if we're taking Secchi on a twice-a-week basis or something like that, and you would know, right? You would know on a sandy pond, like our Secchi is always 3-4 meters, right? And all of a sudden you start to see a decline. So we have one called Lake Muscuppick in Tingsboro, and so pretty active, educated group. The guy we deal with, Eddie Smith, who's I think chairman of the Tingsboro Conservation Commission, lives on that lake, and so he does Secchi. So he'll call me and be like, Joe, you got to get out here, ASAP. Secchi just dropped. We're looking at 4 feet, and it's it's not pea soup green, it's not swirling on the surface, but he knows that bloom is starting because he knows what his clarity is, and he knows when it starts to drop. And so a Secchi disc is like $30 on Amazon. And I mean, we can show you how to use it, or you can watch a YouTube video, but it's one of those things that cheap, inexpensive, you don't need a lab, and it really does tell you a lot. But at that point, right, you get a Secchi drop, could you do a copper treatment? I mean, copper is pretty cheap.
Actually, we could pay for those out of our wetland fund because it's in service of protecting.
There's money in the budget.
You got to use them though. That's the thing. It's like a treadmill, right? Yeah. I always buy exercise equipment and then I never use it.
I found out there's an inflatable kayak at the DPW from the fire station that I could use. I'll go out twice a week and do it.
But I got a boat.
I have a boat too. So.
Yeah.
Sure, you got a boat. You got
Yeah.
You just.
Yeah, I mean, if you do it from like the same spot, same spot roughly, and you're just measuring your Secchi, mark it in a little spreadsheet or a table. And then you'll know, but the thing is, what happens if you get a Secchi drop? Are we able to treat with copper sulfate, let's say? Copper's pretty inexpensive. I mean, I probably put copper pricing in that table. If I didn't, I can get you copper pricing. Pretty inexpensive. I can tell you, though, that your copper price would be a little bit higher because we have to make a special trip out to post a week early. So if you did want to save $1, we can send you posters or email you posters and definitely cut some of the costs down from the separate trip for posting. But then at least you don't get shut down, right? Because if that happened earlier in the season, that beach would have been drastically impacted and it would have been catastrophic.
We did put in our RFP this year contingencies for detecting and or managing.
Did you?
Yeah.
I don't know if I saw it.
It was mentioned in the sandy pond that there was an algae bloom and it would.
Yeah, but I don't know if it asked for anything. I mean, I can put stuff in there, but.
Yeah, we did. Take another look at it.
Okay. Yeah, it's not due yet. It's on my list, but.
I just double checked it. If she says it's in there, it's in there.
Yeah. If it's in there, then it probably is. I only skimmed it, so.
Yeah. A lot of it looks very familiar, but we did put in a few.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, I read it before I actually dive in and start writing my quote, but.
Yeah. And our town manager was interested in what we could do preventatively.
Yeah, it's just big to check and make sure copper sulfate is part of that, that order of conditions and allow it, or could you just do a minor change?
I think the commission could amend the order.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even say an amendment, because amendments, then you got to notify and everything else. I mean, usually most commissions would allow for just a minor change only because you're already using herbicides. So it's kind of like, hey, we're using this one, we just want to add this one, versus one that's no herbicides and now all of a sudden you want to start adding a category, then that would probably be an amendment.
I'll double check and see how it reads too.
That's the problem.
If it doesn't specify the whatever's being used, then it's just a matter of a minor change.
Yep.
Anything else? been very helpful, thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks for having me. You guys are a good group. Yeah.
Sorry, it's nighttime.
That's all right. That's all right. It's all right. I took a couple days off Monday and Tuesday, so I'm relaxed. That's good. My first 2 days off since November of 2021.
Oh, boy.
Are you kidding?
No,
Wow.
my first two.
I can see why you're smiling a little bit.
Yeah, so that was nice, but then I went to Florida when it was like negative 30 here. It was like 75, so pretty good.
I'm not so happy for you now.
I know. Perfect. Well, thanks for having me, and hopefully we get to work together again this year. And
All right, we'll talk, let
Thank
you
you.
know.
yeah, perfect.
Thanks.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You're welcome. This was very informative.
We can make our own sucky discs too. There's YouTubes.
Okay, we can do that. It's just black and white, right?
Yeah, it's just like
On a
electrical
stick.
tape on like a plate or something.
Oh,
Anyway, but yeah, they're like $30 on Amazon.
Yeah.
We don't need a long pole for Flanagan's.
no, that's true. We would need one for,
Sandy.
ideally for
Sandy,
Sandy, but,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, for those days when you just need to get out of the office.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't matter just to order 2 of them anyway, just to have them.
Yeah.
Sure.
Do you know the spelling? SECCHI?
Yes.
I did not spell it right at first.
Well, I remember the spelling from our RFP.
Oh, there you go. All right. Never mind.
So it's not SEQI?
SC. Yeah.
That's how I wrote it.
So we have another item this evening, a discussion on potential wetland regulation additions and modifications.
Yeah, I unfortunately got ambitious in my hopes to have the plans requirements done, and I haven't. So I'm still working on those.
That's okay.
To be continued.
To be continued, because I started doing that, and then in other meetings, and then I didn't like what I wrote, so I just started to change it. Then I started writing the final report for the scenic
Anything you want
waterways. So
edited, let me
Thank you.
know.
I started it today. I got
Thank
almost
you.
the whole page. Because I was like, first I was like, wait, because it says in the email, oh, it's in the grant. Like, oh, what are the odds I'm going to be able to find that? I was able to find it, and I'm like, oh my god. So I can just copy that for the
It gives
most
like
part.
the kind of like requirements, like include this.
Yeah, I basically found Lori Nearing's that she sent in for the Chestnut Water Pole because it's the same grant.
Okay, yeah. Well, and that's what I thought about.
Yeah,
Like, I was looking
so
like,
I
hey,
pulled hers
use
up
theirs.
and I'm just copying the headlines on hers and just putting our information. So I should have that done by the beginning of next week, and then I'll have the plan requirements done for the next meeting so we can get all those together, figure out on those, and then schedule the public hearing for the regulation change in March.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay.
Very good.
Yeah, I got ambitious on that one. Having no server for half of last week made a big difference on things too.
Oh, I bet. What do we have for conservation updates?
Updates. So, what do we have? I did hear, unfortunately, I checked the emails before the meeting. I did get an update from Rohit on the letter from Natural Heritage in regards to the plan changes. I read the letter real quick, but I'll send it out to everybody tomorrow. Stated that they had no comment on the changes. They were fine with those. So we do have that now. I did go out on site on Wednesday. They had started work on fixing when you're looking out towards the wetlands with the solar array going towards your right, the left side of that retaining wall from the crossing, they started working on rebuilding that. But I guess shortly after we had left site, the contractors that were there had left, so I don't know what they did, if anything, after we left on Wednesday. So I have not seen anything from them in regards to our request for an amended notice of intent. So I don't know what
Thank you.
is
Thank you.
Okay.
what the commission wants to do. Technically, per the order of conditions, if they don't comply with the order of conditions, which is getting us that amended NOI, we can issue an enforcement order. I don't know if you want to take action on that this evening, give them another week or two, or what it is you'd like to do on that.
I think another week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to
Next meeting.
next meeting? Okay, that's what I just wanted to get an idea of what you wanted to do on that. Want to give them some more time. So we keep looking at the site. We keep asking. We keep sending them recommendations. And Brianna gets more out of them than I do. I just keep a log of everything that I've seen on site. And they do keep fixing the hay bales when they need to. There is a lot of cleanup of old hay bales that need to be fixed up. Unfortunately, I think they did have issues replacing some hay bales last week because they were frozen to the ground. Hopefully with this warm up, those ones that were frozen, they can get out. And that was my whole point to Rohit too, when I told him to replace them before the winter. But, I say these things, he thinks I'm being ridiculous, and then we make him ask him to do it in the wintertime, and he can't, so it's okay. It's fine. There hasn't been any breakout of anything on the other side of what is there for erosion control. There is some erosion on site, but nothing has gone off, so we're still okay on that point. I just worry about what's going to happen in a spring thaw, rain season, that's all.
Yep. I don't know how it can be much worse than it has been.
I try not to say that because it surprises me every time.
Yeah. It's been something else, huh?
But, so that's that.
What about the stormwater you thought was connected?
Oh, yeah, no, it is. So and that's a violation of their order of conditions. So there is an underground stormwater basin on site that connects everything on the road going down. A few weeks ago when we were on site, everything was covered in ice and the roadway was covered in ice. It still had the basin, the cover, still had the silk sock like over it so water couldn't go in. That's now gone. I don't know when it got removed. I just noticed this is the second week in a row that you could look straight in and see the water underground. So it's connected. And per the order of conditions from DEP's general conditions, any stormwater cannot be hooked up and used until it is been requested and signed off by a professional stormwater engineer or whatever it takes in there. So I just noticed that was on there. So I'm like, okay, well, we'll just keep an eye on that because with the water that's bubbling up from the ground on the other side of the wall, I don't know if it's an overflow, it's not hooked up right, and that's why I'm seeing it coming in. That's why, the main reason why I want to see this order, the amended order come in, so somebody can tell me why that's happening, because nobody seems, I really don't know, because it was dry all summer.
Right.
September, October, and then at some point in November, that's when that water started coming up. And I did look at there is an outlet in the wall that I'm assuming is an overflow, and it has dirt in it. And I had noticed it 2 weeks ago, looked at it again this week, that same line of dirt's still in there, and there's nothing on the bottom of that pipe, so no water's going through it, but I have water coming up from the ground maybe 2 feet away. So I'm just wondering if something's I don't know.
Not hooked up.
I have no
Something
idea.
broke.
Yep.
Yeah, that's my only guess, but I really have no idea. But that stormwater the underground storage basin has water in it. So we're just keeping an eye on that to make sure if that pipe is the outlet that nothing comes out, because there is dirt in that pipe. So I want to make sure nothing, because the cover shouldn't be off because that roadway is not done. It is completely covered by riprap. So the odds of dirt getting in there is pretty slim, but because it's technically not done, it should be the same reason why we have all the erosion control still up, even though I have a foot of water that just wants to go to the wetland that's just on the other side, even though I can't take it down because nothing's done yet.
Okay. Anything else?
Just working on the regulations, the final report, Air Solar 2. I don't know if you guys wanted to mention the meeting we had with Robert, or if you wanted me just to some of the items that I was going to work on with that.
Well, one thing that we talked about is that it was Heather's 6th month / 8th month review, and She will be staying with us forever. I hope.
You're never allowed to leave.
Yeah, everyone is very happy with the
Yeah.
work that you're doing. Yeah, everybody in the town is
Yeah.
good to go. We talked about
Congratulations.
Flanagan's access. That's
Yes.
moving forward.
Yeah, I sent that report to everybody today.
Yeah, I was looking at it today. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Jeez. Don't see it?
I read it.
Yeah, saw it.
Give
You
the,
got time.
give the shortened version of the highlight of that one access.
Okay, so yeah, the Flanagan Ponds feasibility report, when we met with the consultants, Dan and I, we basically told them that out of all the spots they were looking at, the pump station on Central Ave is the most feasible, as it already being a town-owned piece of property with a possible expansion with a tax title property if that would come to be. So that's the one that they focused on, because the other two, one on Groton Harvard Road and one on an old semi-approved subdivision road. So it's like a paper road up a Central. So anyway, so the one on the pump station, the cost was, I think, a little shocking. Even when you read it, you'd be like, well, that's a lot of money for just some grading and paving. But I think it's just more. I think they're just guessing high on that. It was I correct? Was it 520?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I was
That
right.
was
Good.
cheap.
That was the cheapest one. Yep.
520,000?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is odd because they may be factoring in engineering on that, forgetting that the town could do a lot of that engineering. And that's because engineering is very expensive. So that could be one reason why it was so high. But it is a very steep, so there would have to be quite a bit of grading that goes in there.
Right, I did see that.
Yeah.
But isn't that where Joe launches his boat to go in, is through there? I know during the summer I see a small boat behind the building.
I think that's just a resident that keeps their boat padlocked to a tree.
I don't know where he goes in. I'll have to ask him.
Okay.
I've
Because,
seen that boat there all year.
yeah, I mean, it looks like it's a fairly gradual slope when you're behind. If you're looking at the facility, it's to the right of the building and it kind of just goes
Yeah.
right in. And I think somebody just launches there. It's like,
Yep.
I don't think that would be $525,000 worth of whatever.
No,
That was my
I mean,
thought.
yeah, no, and I think, again, I think we think about the engineering, a lot of things, like same thing when they go to repave roads and do the stormwater, they're millions of dollars, and that's because the engineering is the majority of that. So they could be thinking that part of it too, the engineering part for the grading and the paving and the stormwater management and making all those calculations. Which, fortunately enough for the town, we have a town engineer and we have
Yeah,
Dan.
DPW takes care of
They
that.
can do a majority of that. If they were so inclined, they could.
Sure.
We're supposed to meet with Dan Van Chaput in a few weeks about beavers.
Beavers, yes.
We can ask him about that.
We can ask him about that. But it's an interesting little read, interesting to look at. It'd be nice to have a boat launch there, considering we have, and I'm surprised that this hasn't been thought to look more on Sandy Pond too, because we don't have one there either. But I guess one pond at a time.
Well, Sandy Pond is pretty easy.
That's the way to look at it, for sure.
You'd think that.
I mean, right next to the public.
Yeah, you think that, but that's being someone who used to do the Parks Commission meetings, they have concerns as far as parking's an issue because of the town beach. It's very limited, so they don't want to put one there because parking, as it always is, a hazard.
Yeah.
People walking through with their kayaks while kids are running around doing, swimming and stuff, that it becomes a safety issue on there. And as far as the Parks Department goes, with the beach open, having it right there,
Yeah,
and that's the problem.
that's the problem.
But anyway, having one somewhere on one of those two lakes, because look at the pictures, Flanagan's it's quite a bit bigger, even though it's shallower. So they're working on it. Hopefully we get that through. And then it's something I don't know if they're going to go for funding on it. I don't think it would be this town meeting. It'd probably be another year, but.
Yeah.
But that we could also, if we, when we get down the road, if we're seriously considering that, we could, because the state does have money for public access.
Yes, in that report, there is a list of
Yeah.
grant opportunities for it too, so, for funding. So that's all in there. Yeah, we're gonna meet with Dan in a few weeks to go over beavers, because that's been a lot of complaints of it coming in through the town, is high water levels at some of the ponds in town, and people concerned about that. So a couple times, I think at least twice, probably 3 times, I drove around down Calvin Street, down Oak Ridge, down Broughton Harbor to take a look at the water level for both Sandy Pond and Flanagan, because there's been concern about the height on that being high. Is it still really high?
Yeah, there's like
Yeah.
this much space
Okay.
underneath the concrete.
Yeah, I know. It was a couple weeks, a week ago when I went by. It's still like that.
Mm.
All right.
The deeper it is, less weeds, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
No,
Yeah.
actually, the idea of lowering the pond level in the winter was, that would allegedly.
Yeah.
reduce
You
the
actually
weeds.
do drawdowns in the winter to kill the weeds,
Who knows?
and then you bring it up in the summertime because the water level gets hotter. And then there's been and then just in keeping an eye on beaver dam. And there was someone that complained about Shaker Pond too, but I drove by that and I didn't see it being high, and I didn't hear a boo about it afterwards. There is been a couple concerns about that I got recently about apparently I didn't think it was a wetland, but no, GPR flagged it as one at the Canongate condo association.
Yeah.
There's a pond right there in the front. The management company emailed me the other day, and I had a resident from there come in and see me today. They're concerned about the health of that pond in the front there.
Isn't that like a retention pond?
It's a retention pond, but it's certified as a wetland. It was flagged as a wetland. So I have to do some work on that for them and take a look at it. The resident that came in today was worried about mosquitoes, so I told them to get a hold of Central Mass Mosquito Control, and they'll treat it. So that issue's off the board. I gotta take a look at it. They're saying there's runoff coming from the road. So I gotta go drive by and take a look at that. I did mention it to Dan to let him know, to see if he wanted to take a look at it too. Because then he could do those measures. I don't think that's the case though. I think it's far enough off. But I mean, then we can do. I mean, I can't tell if it's bright green in the dead of winter. I have to tell the gentleman I'd have to wait till the spring till it starts getting filled with water to see what we're looking at. But that's something I gotta keep. It's weird. That's every day. I don't know what I'm gonna get. It's either trees, beavers, or water levels high right now. It's interesting.
Good stuff.
Before you started, I think we did go through a thing where there was concern that the water level in Long Pond had gone way up. And, well, it did, but then we had the beaver deceiver finally put in, and the water level dropped, but they were still concerned it was still
Yeah.
up. And what had happened was their community dock had, when the water level went up, that raised with the water level and got askew. And so when the
I
water
remember
level
that.
dropped,
It looked like it had, yeah.
so,
No, this one is, and I don't know if it was this gentleman that was here or one of his neighbors that had emailed me on Broughton Harbor saying his dock is underwater, and that's, but, well, I was like, oh, it's high, and yeah, I was like, okay, and I drove by, oh, it is high, but I've gone by down Broughton Harbor Road at least twice, real slow, to try to see someone's dock underwater. I don't see it. I see everyone's dock, I can see it, the whole thing, so I'm assuming maybe it dropped. I don't know. It's dropped enough, but
Maybe take your dock out.
but so we're looking at that. I'm keeping an eye on it. I'll make the loop again tomorrow.
You need a drone.
yeah.
There's no way I could fly that. I'm not coordinated enough to. I can't even play my kids'
George
video
was
games.
excited, though.
Yeah. Plenty of time.
I can't even play my kids' video games. They got too many buttons. There's no way I could fly a drone.
I bet your kids could do it.
Oh, I guarantee you, my
There we go,
oldest
just
could
bring
do
one of
it.
them along.
Somebody I know was posting on Facebook videos of learning to fly this drone, and it's a lovely video of it going right up into a tree and then getting stuck. So that would
Mine,
be,
I would be like, oh, let's take a quick look at the pond, and I would just lose it in the pond.
maybe though we could get, something from China. Spy balloon. We could,
They're more south, right? They really made it.
Yeah. It didn't make
You
it.
just get a
Yeah.
remote control Zeppelin. Just do
Yeah.
that. That would be easy to fly.
Yeah.
What else we got?
That's about it. We do have. So we met with Robert too. We discussed the people that wanted to do the trail work and maintenance on Pine Meadow. So I'm going to work on making a nice little like flyer to request people that wanted to do that. And we're going to call it the Friends of Pine Meadow, instead of getting confused with the Greenway Committee or anything like that. Because in my head, like, I don't know how many people, I do because I've worked for town for a long time. I hear committee and I'm like, oh, it's a legal thing from the town and this and that. So we're going to get away from that, more or less call it like a stewardship program. So we'll start with that one, and hopefully as we get more lands, we can spread it out more and get more friends of, I don't know, pick a good property. So I'm gonna work on that and make a flyer
Instead
up.
of friends,
and-
maybe like casual acquaintances, maybe.
It's not BFFs, it's just friends.
Just friends.
It's friends.
I mean, I could make some sort of nice acronym like Lori Nearing does with PACE, but I'm not good at that stuff.
Yeah, I think real hard, like, how do we make this into
So,
something?
FUPM. FUPM, Friends of
Say
Pine
that.
Meadow.
So we're gonna work on getting that out and getting people and see what people we can get signed up to do that, and hopefully, I don't know, start working on something to do with that. Get
Well,
people out
when
there.
you get
to
the flyer
maintain.
ready, then I'll post it on the community Facebook pages too.
Yes. Yeah, I steer far away from those.
They're so entertaining though.
I do it in my own town. I'm not doing it in the town that I work in.
Yeah.
So yeah, I will work on that and get that done. Hopefully we can get some people signed up to do that, and hopefully come a little bit warmer weather, we can start going out there and cleaning up some trails, get some new the trails reblazed, and look at getting benches out there.
If we
Now
get
that George
feedback.
gets retired, do we
Yeah.
enjoy out there?
Yeah. If we get feedback from enough people, we could use part of one of our regular meetings to have an initial, like,
Yeah, we could.
come on in and then help people set up their own structure.
Mhm.
George could give a lot of advice.
And if we can get people on there that live on the
Especially-
ponds, we can educate them while they're here on
Yeah.
safe
Yeah.
What do we think?
on
Like,
living.
what would be the optimal head count? Like, are we looking like for 100 people, or just looking for
Oh.
like 20 or 5?
So when we
or
had
what?
when I worked in Littleton and we had them, I think we had upwards of 4 to 6 people per conservation land. So at this point, if we got 10, I'd be happy. If we got 6, I'd be happy. If we had 25, even better. Like, to me, it doesn't matter
Okay.
how many people we have, because then you know what I mean. What am I going to get? Oh darn! There was 6 people out there clearing trails in one day. I don't think anyone's going to be. I'm not going to be upset about that, unless we started getting issues with people doing too much and doing things they're not supposed to. Then we'd have to bring that in. But I don't think that's going to happen.
Robert did say there probably have to be, I think you brought up liability issues. that
Yeah,
probably
they will
be-
have to. We'll have to. We might, depending on what work they're doing on site, we might have them sign waivers. Like when we did the weed pull. That's all. But I don't think anyone will.
Anything else from members, updates?
I have a comment, maybe.
Sure.
At a last meeting or the meeting before, I think Heather, you mentioned that Panther Place was on hold for the winter.
Yes, they're digging foundations. They have one building permit and a bunch on his desk right now.
I just wanted to make sure someone knew that things were moving.
Yes, I think it was Ken Diskin came in and told me that there was a excavator on site, and when I went to see Charlie today to talk to him about Ayer 2 and the retaining wall, I asked him. He said, "Oh no, he's pulling permits. That's warmer, so they're starting to do foundations." But when I was out on site last time, their erosion control was in pristine condition, so I can't imagine it deteriorated much over the winter.
Okay, just wanted to make sure because it's still winter technically.
Yes, it is.
Well, we might hear keepers next week.
My
What's going on?
My daffodils are already.
Are they?
They're coming up, yeah. Poor things. Anyway, that's all I had. Just wanted to make sure.
Yep.
George, got anything? No? Mark?
I haven't gotten any emails back on the signs being created yet, so when they come, they come. Did you happen to send a check for the $20 to the
The
designer?
invoice went to the warrant this week.
I'm sorry?
It went into the warrant this week.
The $20.
Why does it have to go on the warrant? It's
So-
part of the grant?
Yeah, so the way the town pays all their bills, that the warrants are bi-weekly, so we submit them, and then
okay.
the check will go out next week.
Okay,
That kind
all
of.
right.
Yeah,
I didn't get it.
yeah, so so yeah, bills, when you do badges bills, it's a warrant, so we
Okay.
payroll, and then you have your warrant week, so this is a warrant week, which is when we pay all the invoices and bills, and they all get submitted one week, and the checks go out the following week.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So has anybody else noticed the misspelling?
Just that one person, I'm assuming, or else everybody else is just mocking us behind our backs. I would assume the latter.
Yeah.
I haven't seen anything on the Facebook page.
You know, they're like,
People
all
saw
these
it and
newbies
they
that are coming to town, they think they know what they're doing.
So I guess we shouldn't throw if we do swap them out, don't throw them out, the old ones, in case somebody comes in and says they're misspelled again. We should have put up both sides, formerly known as.
Yeah.
Well, we just keep them, and then after a while, if everything's fine, then we auction them off as a, I don't know, something.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll make it like, the double-headed, buffalo nickel, or I don't think it'd be quite like that kind of dirty.
But I mean, in 15, 20 years, who knows? Maybe the Historical Commission might want them for something.
I'll buy one right now.
2850.
It's used.
Not the one in my office.
That's it. Before I came, there was deer walking on my stairs, pretty much right in front of the house. It was kind of fun. You have somebody at your front door. You go to look, I'm like, wow, there's deer.
Oh, wow. Huh.
They're chomping on whatever little bit of grass was trying to grow or something there. So, who knows? That was fun.
Jess, you got anything? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed nay. Passes unanimously.